Americans may be souring on the GOP candidates.
Here in Iowa, a lot of Republican voters are waiting before deciding who they're going to support.
And Obama's Gaddafi bounce may be fading. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup's editor-in-chief.
I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today.
And this is Election Matters. Well, we have a first for you. Susan is in Des Moines, Iowa, where she has been following very closely the candidates, because now, Susan, we have it firm, do we not? January 3rd, that's when voters will actually, in Iowa, get to express their sentiment about whom they want to vote for in their caucuses?
That's right, and after 4 years when Republicans really tried to delay the start of the contest, the Iowa caucuses turned out to be on precisely the same date they were in 2008.
January 3rd. Now our data, our new positive intensity data that we just have now for the last 2 weeks show that for most of the candidates, Americans are actually less enthusiastic than they were the previous week, with a couple of exceptions for the candidates that aren't rated very highly at all. That suggests, as I mentioned at the outset, Republicans may be souring on all of these candidates, kind of saying, we're not sure if any of them are who we really want. What are you sensing there in Iowa?
Well, I've spent the last 2 days here following some candidates, talking to as many voters as I can. And there's certainly not a single candidate who is creating a lot of enthusiasm here. You see a lot of voters who say there are 2 or 3 or 4 candidates they could consider supporting, but none of them strong enough to sign up right away. So this contest is getting off to a slower start than it has in some years.
Now, of course, a lot of the attention, Susan, is on Mitt Romney and Rick Perry and, of course, Herman Cain. But I know you've been following, you told me a few minutes ago, 2 of the candidates who aren't doing well at all now in our positive intensity or in the trial heat ballots, and that would be Rick Santorum, the former senator from Pennsylvania, and Michelle Bachman, a current congresswoman from Minnesota. They have like 5 and 3 and 8. They have positive intensity scores that are way down low there. Do they honestly think they have a chance?
I think they do. And, the situation here is not at all settled. They are both candidates who need to break through in Iowa. They need very strong showings in the caucuses on January 3rd if their presidential hopes are to continue at all. They're both working pretty hard here. They both have some ties to the state. Michelle Bachman was born in Waterloo, Iowa. So, yes, I think they think that the openness of the field means it's still possible they could break through.
Now, as I mentioned, neither are generating a lot of strong enthusiasm nationally among Republicans, but do you sense at the rallies there's a lot of electricity, excitement, a lot of kind of gung-ho-ness that would drive caucus goers to want to support them on Jan 3rd?
I don't think either of them have a lot of support here at the moment, but they both have certain kinds of voters who like them a lot. Rick Santorum, for instance, has homeschooled his children. Homeschool parents are a big political factor in the Republican Party here in Iowa. I went to an event with him in a small town in western Iowa this morning, and there were 7 kids there who were being homeschooled, who came as kind of a field trip to watch Rick Santorum. So that's good news for him. Michelle Bachman yesterday spoke at a conservative Christian church in another small town in Iowa, and those voters were responding to her. She talked about her faith journey. So yes, there are certain kinds of voters that they're targeting here, but at the moment, neither has kind of expanded that to the point where you'd say that they have at the moment a real strong position in the Iowa field.
Susan, you're not following Mitt Romney around because Mitt Romney is not there very much. Is that accurate?
That's right. He's not here. He's made just 3 trips here, and a lot of resentment here that Mitt Romney's not playing more seriously. He came in second here last time after investing a lot of money and time. This time he's trying to invest not much money, not much time, not raise expectations. But there is some thought that with the same 30% he got last time, he could win the caucuses this time, given the fact that it's such a big field.
Yeah, in our positive intensity data just out, Mitt Romney's at a 13, which is middling, where he's been most of the time this year. And I should point out, by contrast, Herman Cain's been up in the 30% range. Michelle Bachman herself and Rick Perry were at some points up in the 20% range. Rudy Giuliani was up there when we were measuring him. But Mitt Romney's never, at least in recent months, been in that territory. He's just not generating a lot of excitement nationwide among Republicans, and also in most of the trial heat data, our data, other data we look at, he's at best tied for the lead, but certainly nobody would say he's a clear front runner nationally. So we're going to have to wait and see how Iowa and New Hampshire play out. Herman Cain, 78% name ID, Susan. Isn't that incredible?
It's a remarkable rise for a man who is generally not well known at all across the country when he launched his presidential campaign, it seemed kind of quixotic. Now I think you have to take it more seriously.
Yeah, he was at 21% in that range when he first started measuring him. So that's a 50% plus name ID gain among Republicans for Herman Cain, far and away higher than for Michelle Bachman or some of the other less well-known candidates as we started out. So if nothing else, Herman Cain's become a household name among Republicans nationally since he started campaigning. By the way, he's not there in Iowa, at least not right now.
He's not here right now, but one thing that's happened is he's become better known. His positive intensity score has begun to erode a bit down to 30% for the past 2 weeks. It had been up to 34%. So it may be both good news and bad news that he's better known. He's better known, taken more seriously, but as a result, he gets more questions. We take his answers more seriously. His 999 tax plan has gotten analyzed by many news organizations and questions raised about that. So one of the things we're looking for is whether he can stand up to the additional scrutiny that his new fame is bringing him.
Absolutely. Of course, all these Republicans are going to have to run against President Barack Obama. Susan, over the weekend, he got a minimal bounce in our polling. He was up to 44% in our daily tracking one day over the weekend. And some people look at it and say maybe that's a result of the death, of course, of Gaddafi in Libya. And Obama had been involved committing at least some U.S. forces in that, the Allied efforts against Gaddafi. He's had a string of these more positive news reports, foreign news reports about dictators falling and some other things. He just announced that in Iraq, the troops are going to all be out by the end of the year. Do you think that's going to matter? When you're talking to Iowa voters there, the fact that Obama's shoring up his credentials, it looks like in the data on foreign affairs, is that going to matter?
I spent 2 days talking to voters here. No voter has mentioned that to me at all. There's Gaddafi's death, Osama bin Laden's death, something Americans had been waiting for a decade, gave President Obama only a limited bounce. I think it's helpful in that it gives him it strengthens his credentials as commander-in-chief. It means it's harder for Republicans to attack him on those grounds. But in terms of giving him a big bump, I don't think so at a time Americans are so concerned about jobs and the economy.
One last point, Susan. The birther issue came up again. I think it was a minor point that Rick Perry made in an interview with Parade magazine, but a lot of news people have picked it up again where he was kind of saying, I'm not sure where Obama was born. But when we look at the data, about half of Republicans, when we analyzed it last, still weren't convinced Obama was born in the U.S., but I don't think that's going to be an issue to you.
Well, I think anyone who does not think President Obama was born in the United States is probably not going to be an Obama voter, even if they were persuaded that he was. But it is one of those kind of annoying issues, I think, it's not helpful for the president to have such a significant fraction of Americans have a question about his place of birth.
Absolutely. Susan, great having you with us from Iowa. We'll see you back here in Washington next week. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup Editor-in-Chief.
I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today.
And this is Election Matters.